Hi everyone, in this video we are going to create service classes, control classes for our roles, users and authority entities that we created in our previous session. So let's start with the DTOs, that is data transfer objects for entity classes. So in our package, DTO package, first we're going to create is authority DTO. And here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a string of name. So what exactly we have in our entity, we have name, and we also have roles, but the only thing that I'm interested in DTO is for authority is the name, because this is what I'm going to use to set when I'm creating the roles. Okay, so that is what I'm interested here. Next I'm going to do is I'm going to create a constructor. I can do, let me use a shortcut. Okay, constructor, and then I'm going to generate the getters and setters. Perfect. So our authority DTO is ready. Next I'm going to create is the roles DTO. I'm going to say this as role DTO. And in this, what I'm going to do is first I'm going to create is the role name, private string name, and then private. Now as we know that every role will have a set of authorities, or you can say a collection of authorities, right? So that's the reason why we need to have a set of authority here. And then there it is. Perfect. I'll import the set from the util package, and then I'm going to create the getters and setters. Perfect. And I can also override toString method just in case I can see what I'm passing. And the same thing I can do even for authority here, just overriding the toString method. And then finally we are going to create the user class, user DTO. And now in user DTO, what we are going to have is we are going to have all the fields that are in the entity as well as the role DTO, the collection of role DTO. So here first I'm going to create is private integer ID. Okay, this is going to be used when we create the user, and then once the auto-generated ID is created for the user, then we map from the entity to the DTO and send back that as a response to the client. So that's the reason we have ID, and then same as okay, and then private string last name, private string username, and then password private. Then I have the email ID, and then I have the boolean, whether it is enabled or not, and then finally I have the set of role DTO. Perfect. Let me auto import this, and then getters and setters. And I can also have the toString method overridden. Perfect. So here Okay, so our DTO is ready. Next step is to create the controller classes. So in the controller package, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the user controller. Okay, and here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a user service, okay, which I have not done it, but you know, just for now I'll put it this way here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a method called create user, okay, and it's going to be public and here it's going to be user DTO has a response. That means once we create the user in the database, we then return back the same user object back to the client with all the details. That means the user ID and other details that like first name, last name, and all those information. So basically what we're doing is we are trying the same create method, create user will be used for register, registering a user. Okay, so here we have user DTO, and then I say create user. Then here I have the request body, and the request body is going to be the user DTO itself, because when we create an object, means when we create a user, we need all those information. We will need the username, first name, last name, email ID. It's just that you know when you're registering a user, all those information are required, and those information will be validated and then saved into the database. Okay, so here I have it, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to invoke the service class, and then I'm going to say create user DTO. Okay, and in the response, what I'm going to have is I'm going to have again the user DTO, and I'm going to return the user DTO. Okay, so we're getting compiled error because of this. Let's do one thing here. Let's go ahead and create our service class for the user, and this is going to be an interface. So let's create an interface first, and say finish. And here then we'll have an implementation of this user service. But before that, we need to have a method saying public user DTO, and then I would say create user, and this is going to take the parameter as user DTO. Perfect. So okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a class that implements the user service interface. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the interface as a user service and say finish. And you can see we have the implementation, default implementation here. Let me save all. Okay, so it's got. Now we're going to add the logic here. Before that, let's go back to the controller and finish our logic here. So what it's doing is it's going to ask, it's giving an error. Let's say user set cannot be resolved. So let me import this. Okay, perfect. And next what we're going to do is we are going to add all our annotation, because user is now a resource, right? So it's going to have all the mapping, request, it's going to be a REST controller, and this is going to be auto wired. And next what we're going to do is we're going to have a post mapping. This is going to be basically a post mapping, a post method with path, and the path is going to be I can use this as register user. Okay, and what I'm going to say is I'm going to say this is going to consume a media type of application JSON. Okay, it's going to be a JSON value. So what I'm trying to do is I'm saying here that the request that is coming in must be of type JSON. Okay, it should be a JSON format basically, and then I'm going to say it produces again the same thing. I'm going to use the media type and say this as is going to produce again the JSON type, JSON value. So what I'm saying is it's going to, whatever the object that is going to return from this method, it's also going to be a format JSON. Okay, so with that, now I guess we have the controller ready. The only thing is that we can again change this to an entity model, because that's what we are using in our, if you look at the flight controller, we are using entity model, and this is from GetUser. That's what we used in our previous course. So let's be in sync with that. So let's try to do the same thing, entity model. Okay, and here what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this entity model dot of perfect. Okay, so that's, I guess now we are good with the create user method. Okay, so what we are doing is we are having a mapping of registered user. So whenever we make this call, then it is going to take user DTO, that is a JSON format, is going to consume a JSON format, user DTO object, and then create the user in the database. And in return, we are going to get again a user DTO. That is what we are going to return in response. Okay, so one more thing that we are going to do is we are also going to add an update user method. Okay, so let's do that. I'll just copy paste this, and it's going to be an update method. So what we are going to do is we are going to change this to a put mapping. Okay, and this is going to be update user, and I'll change the name, update, perfect. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this as update user. Okay, and let's auto import this. Everything looks good. The only thing is we don't have the update user method in the service class. So let's go ahead to our interface and create it. Here, and then in the service class I'm going to override it. Okay, a typo, let's fix this. Okay, perfect. Now what we're going to do is we're going to write the logic here. So before we start writing the logic for the user resource, what we're going to do is we're going to also write it for the role controller, that is a role resource. So let's do that. Okay, so here I'm going to create a role controller. And first thing is I'm going to add I'm going to make it as first controller, and then I'll follow the same steps. First create the role service, which I currently don't have it. I'll be creating that, but it's going to be role service. And here I'm going to create the method called create role, and the request body is going to be the role DTO. Okay, and the return. Okay, so first thing is I need to have a return type, and the return type is going to be my entity model, and it's going to be the role DTO. So let me auto import. Okay, fantastic. Now here I'm going to call the role service dot create role. And the return type for this is going to be again the role DTO. Entity model dot off, and it's going to be role DTO. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the role service interface. It's going to be the interface. Finish, and in this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the method called create role. Role DTO create role. Okay, now next is our class, and it implements the role service. Okay, perfect. So now we have the role service and the role controller, and let me import this, and let's add a mapping here, and the mapping is going to be, it's a creator, it's going to be a post mapping. So let's do that. Post mapping, and the path is going to be create role, and consumes media type. It's going to be JSON value, and we have it produces remember that the default is always a JSON, but it's always good to practice to declare it in the whenever you have the post mapping. It's a good practice to declare it over here. Okay, and alright, so I guess we are all set with the role controller. And now what we're going to do is we are going to, okay, I missed out one thing, is auto edit. Okay, so all set. And one more thing is we are also missing the annotation for the service class, right? So let's go to our service, both the services, and add the annotation. Perfect. And to the service class here for the user. Okay, done. Now next is for the road controller, what we are going to do is we are going to first implement the service class method, that is here we are going to add the logic here. So what we're going to do is first we are going to create the role, and then we will be creating the user. Okay, because when creating the user, we definitely need to assign some default roles, right? We can assign them a read-only access to get started, and then later if a user needs some extra roles or authorities, we can update the user, and that's the reason why we had the update user method over there, okay, in the user controller. So we'll come back to the user controller, but first let's continue and complete the role resource, all the implementations here. So next, what we're going to do is here in the request, we're getting the role DTO, and that is, we're going to get two things. One is the role name, and the other is the set of authorities, okay? And remember that the authorities is nothing but the permissions, right? And for that, we are going to have the permission for each resource, okay? For example, we have flight resource and we have the user resource, okay? You can have many other resources like booking resource, okay? So for a role, we can have an authority saying that, okay, user can do all the crewed operations on flight resource, but can do only read operation on the booking resource. Okay, so that's how we are going to have different authorities. And for example, for flight, we're going to have flight read, flight create, flight update, flight delete. And if there is a booking resource, then we can have booking create, booking read, booking update, and booking delete. And then depending on the requirements, we can assign those authorities to a particular role. I hope you're getting, okay? I guess you're trying to make a picture out of it, and you're understanding what exactly I'm trying to say, okay? And we'll implement that when we are creating roles for flight as well as user, okay? So for now, we are creating a role. So we're getting two things in the request. One is the role name and the set of authorities, okay, when I'm creating the role. And this is going to be a one-time task, basically, you know, when we are creating an application, the admin guys or the admin team is going to do this, creating the role one time. And might be they might try to drop a role or delete a role or update a role, but mostly it's going to be a one-time, you know, task. Okay, so let's continue here, and let's create a role first thing, and I'm going to create this as role. Okay, and then I'm going to say role dot set name, role DTO dot get name, and then I'm going to say role dot set authorities, and I'm saying go DTO dot get authorities dot. I'm going to use Java 8 stream, and I'm going to map it, and I'm going to say this thing. What I'm going to do is I'm mapping all the authorities which are in the DTO from, it means I have authorities DTO, right? Authority DTO in the role DTO. So I'm going to map them to the authority entity and set it into the authorities of the role. Okay, so here I'm going to say authority is equal to and authority. Okay, here I also need to create the repositories. Okay, so let's do that first. Let's create the role repository, private raw repository, and the same way I need let me minimize this. I also need authority repository, and I'm going to auto wire this. Okay, so now I'm going to use the authority repo dot find by name a dot get name. Okay, and if I'll explain you what I'm trying to do here. Okay, the authority if it is null, if it is same as null, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the authority. Okay, authority is equal to a authority.repo. Save authority, and I'm going to view this as get name. Okay, and then I'm going to return the authority. And then here what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the collect, and it should be here, collectors dot to set. Okay, I'm getting compile time, and it says get authority is undefined, so looks like I don't have an, I do have it. Okay, I don't have a constructor with that takes just the name, so let's create that constructor just with the name. Perfect. Now if I go back to the role service here, all good. So what I'm doing is when setting the authorities, all I'm doing is from the role DTO, okay, I am creating a role entity object, and this is a detached form. Okay, if you know a little bit about the Hibernate, I have a detached object here. Okay, and then what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to set all the values from the role DTO to the role object. Okay, and in that process, when I'm setting it, I'm checking if the authority exists in the database. Okay, if it does not exist, that means it does not exist, then I'm creating an authority. Okay, and then I'm setting it into the role. Now I have the role, I have the role object. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this, and I'm going to say role repo dot save role. Okay, and then I'm going to do is I'm going to now once I get it, I have to return back, right? I have to return back the same value, that is role DTO. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to say this as role DTO dot set name, and I'm going to say role dot get name. Okay, and then I'm going to say role DTO dot set authorities. Now you might ask, okay, what we already have all this information in role DTO, but why do you again set it back? The only thing is we always need to send back the one that we saved. Okay, so that's why we are doing here the same role.get. I'm going to do the same thing, stream dot map I'm going to say this as new authority DTO a dot get name, and this is going to be dot, it's going to be here, yes, dot collect collectors dot to set. Perfect, it's giving me an error, and what is the error? It says map. Okay, I have the stream new authority DTO a dot get name. Okay, and I say collectors to dot set. Yes, everything looks good. Authorities dot name. Okay, looks like I did not import it. Okay, perfect. Now it's all set. So now what we're going to do is we're going to just return the object here, and that is going to be this. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some SOPs just to make sure that whatever we are getting, that we are getting from the request and what we are saving in the database gets printed, and we get to see what exactly is happening. So here I'm going to do is this out, and here I'll say this as row DTO. Okay, and then I have here after the save, I would just add this thing, just making sure that the save is successful, and then I'm going to say again here row DTO after in response, you can say. Perfect. So we are all set with the role, and I guess we should be all good with the role resource. So what we are doing is whenever we send a request through Postman, it's going to accept the role DTO, which is going to have the name and authorities, and then it's going to create the role for us, okay, and return back the role DTO. Okay, so with that, let's also complete our user controller, and then finally we'll try to test it and look at the database tables. So let's continue with the create user. So here, let's go to the create implementation. In this, what we're going to do is, here we're going to add a lot of logic, so when you're trying to register a user, you know that you need to first check whether the user already exists in the database or not. If user already exists, then we have to respond back saying that, okay, the user name already exists, or the user email that you're trying to use already exists. So for that, let's add that logic. First thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a method that says check if username exists. Okay, so we know that when registering a user, we're going to take username as a field and also email ID as a field. So we need to have the validation for both. Okay, so let's do that. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a method that says check if username exists. Okay, so public boolean, and I'm going to say check if username exists. Okay, user DTO, and here I'm going to say return string, and before that I also need the user repository, and here I'm going to say that as iUser repo, and here I'm going to auto wire it. Perfect, and then come back to our check if user exists, and here string utils. I'm going to use this utils from the lang package, that is Apache Commons lang 3 package, and I'm going to say this as is not blank, and say user DTO dot get username. I'm basically checking that if user is not null or empty. Okay, and then I'm going to check in the database user repo dot find by user, find by user name. Remember that we had two methods created in the user repo saying that find user by username and find user by email ID, and this is how we are going to use it. So here what we are doing is user DTO dot get username dot to lowercase. And the reason why we are using here to lowercase is because whenever we save the user in the database, we are going to make sure that we save it in the lowercase, or else, or we can add some logic that would, once you get the user, we then ignore the cases. Okay. So, but for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the user. When we create the user, we are going to save it in all lowercase. Okay. So with that, I'm going to save this as not null, and that's it. I guess I am okay here. Yes, here I'm missing a bracket. Perfect. So I have a single line check where I'm checking the username is not null or empty, and then I'm checking it is in the database. Okay, and the same way I'm going to have another method to check the email ID. Private boolean check if user email ID exists. And I'm going to say again string. I can copy the same thing here. And instead of user, I'm going to say get email ID find user by email ID. And here I'm going to say this as get email ID. I think we are all good with this. Yeah, here. Perfect. So with this, we are all set, I guess. Yes, here we have both the methods. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this here. Now, when creating the user, check if user name exists. If it is true, then I'm going to throw an exception, and an exception that says response status exception, and I would say this is a bad request saying that username already exists. Okay, and this is going to be HTTP status and say bad request, and I'm going to say this as user name already exists. Okay, and the same way I'm going to say check if user email exists, and if it exists, then I'm going to throw new the same thing, and I would say here that user email ILB already exists. Okay, so if none of these conditions matches or meets, then what we're going to do is we are going to create the user is equal to new user. This is a detached form of object, and now we are going to set all the values from the user DTU to the user. So first thing is we can directly use the bin utils. Instead of setting all the values, I can use bin utils from this and say copy properties, and it says source. The source is the user DTO and the target is the user. Okay, and then here I'm going to say user.set email ID, user.get email ID to lowercase, and user.set username get username dot to lowercase. Right, I said you that before when we are checking, we are going to check it as a lowercase. Okay, so just to make things simple, and you can always add some logic to save the email ID or the username has is whatever the user gives in the request, but you can check here for ignoring the case. Okay, But to make it simple, I'm just adding here as I'm inserting the record, that is username and the email ID in lowercase. So next what we're going to do is we also have the roles in this now. So to do that, what we're going to do is when registering a user, for sure we're not going to, the user is not going to have the role also in the request, right? So the role is going to be null, basically here. For the first time when the user is creating, this is going to be null. So what we can do is, we can assign a default value or the role to the user. Normally that's what we do is when a user is created, we assign a default role like read-only permissions with read-only permissions, and then the user now has access to the application with just read-only permission. Okay, for example, if the user is requesting access to the development environment, then what we do is we give the access as some view-only rule, and then in that we give the read permissions. But for now, what we can do is, let's make it as a two-step. Okay, we'll create a user, and then we'll update the user with role. Okay, and that will have logic here. So for now, what we're going to do is we are going to put it over here, or else let's do one thing. Let's assign a default role to the user. Okay, so with that, what we do is we're going to create a role. We're going to fetch the role in the database. Now assume that the role ID, okay, for the developer, okay, assume that the developer role is the ID is 3. So we're going to use that and assign it here. Let me create the repository. Role repo, and then I'm going to have here is find by ID. Okay, and then I'm going to pass this as 3. Let's assume that the 3 is the role ID for developer, and that's what we're going to assign to the user. Any user who registers will get this role. Okay, and this is going to be my optional role, and okay, and this is role, and this is from the util. Okay, and then the role. Perfect. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a set of role, and that is going to be new as set. The reason why I create is because we have in user object, user is equal to, we are going to user dot set roles. Okay, and before that we also need to add the role, right? We need to add the role dot get. Perfect. So what I did is I first got the role from the database, okay, the default role that will be assigned to all the users who registers, and then I created a set and added that role and then set it in the user detached object. Next is, now here one main thing that we need to remember, when we register or create a user, it also comes with a password, right? And we don't want the password to be saved as a plain text in the database so that anyone can read it, right? If it's a plain text, so we have to somehow encrypt it and then save it into the database, right? So let's see how we can do that. And that's an important step because in real time we never save the password in plain text, okay, as raw whatever the user sends, we don't save it as is, we encrypt it and then we save it to the database. Okay, so let's see how we do that. To encode the password, what we're going to do is we are going to use password encoder from spring-security. So what we're going to do is first let's go back to our config file here and let's create a bean, and this is going to be public password encoder. Okay, and then I'm going to call this as encrypt password encoder. And here I'm going to say return a new password encoder, and this is going to be the bean. So what I'm doing is I am creating, instead of creating an object in all the classes wherever I need, I'm creating a bean of the password encryptor or password encoder, and this object or this class I'm going to use to encode my plain password and save it in the database. Okay, so let's make use of this, and in the user service here I'm going to auto wire the password encoder. Okay, and here I'm going to use auto wired password encoder. I'm going to say this as encoder. Okay, and this is where I'm going to use it here. And if you look at this, I also need to set few other values, that is the user dot set enable to true, and then user dot set password, and here is where I'm going to use it, dot encode raw password. And this raw password is coming from the, now if you know that when you're trying to register, user basically don't give the password, right? They don't select the password. It's just that when you register, a default password is sent to the user via an email or basically in the IT form of the project. What they do is the admin guys will send out a default password, or they might ping you the default password, right? So what we're doing here is we are going to generate a default password, and there's going to be a random one, and then we are going to set that in the database. Okay, so let's do that. Here I will do I'll be using a random string utils dot, and I'm going to say random, not numeric, I'm going to use a random, and I'm going to say this as letter 7, use alphanumeric as also a number. Okay, you can see that what it says is it says you can use count is the length of the string is going to be 7 letters, yes, true, use letters and also numbers to create a random string, and this is going to be my default password. Okay, and when we're creating through a RESTful web service, that is through Postman, this is the only time when we are going to see the raw password. Okay, so I would like to print this, and this is for just our reference, and make sure that in production code you never print the password. Okay, you might have a logic over here that will send the email to the end user. Okay, But anyways, here what we're going to do is we're going to print the password, and perfect, and then finally we are going to encode this and set it into the user object. The next what we are going to do is we are going to save the user dot save user, and then once the user is saved, what we are going to get is we are going to get back the user again. If you look at the save method, what it does is now it returns back as the session object. That is nothing but in inheritance. We are getting now it is, it is from the database. So this is what we get. Now we convert this entity object to our DTO object and then return it. Okay, so here the return type is going to be user DTO, and now I'm going to, instead of using bin utils properties, that is copy properties, I'm going to manually set all the values from user DTO to the from the entity user to the user DTO. And the reason why I do is because now user is going to have the role, and the role is then going to have the authority. So it's kind of doing all those manually here. Rather, what I will do is like instead of using copy properties, I have to do a lot of logic, right? So it's better that I do it manually and I do it in a separate method rather than doing it here. So it's kind of more what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip it here, and then I'll show you, I'll fast forward basically and then show you what exactly I have done. Okay, here I have created a GetUser DTO method, and in that I am passing the entity user, okay, and then setting all the values. Like you can see here, I am setting the email ID and all those values here, even the password and the roles, and then the authorities, and then returning back that as the user DTO object. And then finally I'm returning the DTO object of the create user method. So with this, I guess we are all set with the user resource for the create. And now let's check on the other method, that is the update user, and it's going to be the same, like it's going to be the similar what we did for the create, but a little tweak in it. What it's going to do is it's going to first find the user. Let me do that. It's not going to be it's not going to involve all this logic what we have for create user, but let's do that here and finish this create user and the update user logic. The first thing is user. I'm going to, so when I'm trying to update, that means what I'm going to do is, okay, I have a typo here, it looks like, let's correct this, go back here and update this. Perfect. So when you're trying to update the user, that means the user is already created, and you might be updating because the user is trying to update either the email ID or trying to not the email ID, sorry, the first name or the last name. So we are going to restrict the user to just update the first name, last name, and password, and also if the admin people, they want to update the roles for the existing user, then we are going to use the update user method. So in that case, first what we do is we get the user from the database. Okay, and I will say user get username to lowercase. And once I get the user, what I'm going to do is user.set first name get. So as I said, we're going to restrict the user just to update allow the user to update first name and last name and password, okay, and also the role, right? So then we're going to have a user.last name and let's call this, and then we have set of roles, and then we are going to iterate over this. For each role in DTO, I'm going to say DTO present in user DTO.get roles, and then set dot add. I'm going to use as role repo dot find by name, that name. Okay, and then finally the user dot set roles. I'm going to say this as set. Okay, and then user is equal to user repo dot save user. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is, the only change that I'm going to have here is the definitely the user ID. Sorry, to say that, yeah, the ID. So that's what I'm going to set. User DTO dot set ID, user dot get ID, and finally I'm going to return this. Perfect. Okay, so I think we are all set. Here I can use this. So the update is done. Okay, update user, that's all we need for the update user. What I'm doing, first I'm getting the user from the database, then I am updating the first name, last name, and the roles. Okay, and these are the only three things that you can update for any given user. Okay, we are having that for now. And what else do we need to have for the, I guess we are all set with the user service. Now let's go back to our controller and let's try to understand the flow. So what we're going to do is, to create the user, we're going to have the user DTO in the request, and then we're going to invoke the create user. And in the create user, what we're going to do is first check the username exists, and then email ID exists, and then we are going to create the user, and then set the email ID, username, all the roles, and by default what we are going to do is, we are going to assume for now that the ID 3 is the default role that will be assigned to any user. Okay, so then next is, then we set it to the user, and then finally encode the password, and then set it to the user, and then save it. Okay, and then for the update, we have the three things that we update for the user. Let's check from the controller side. Okay, it's the same thing, request body, user, update, and finally we return back. It's a put mapping. All looks good. I think that's all that we need for user, role, and for the authority. Let's take a look at authority again. Yep, entity, okay, not the entity part, but here. Yes, we also have the, okay, so everything looks good. It's been a long session, I understand. So what we can do is, we can end the session here, and in the next video what we'll do is, we will test this resource, that is the role and the user. So what we're going to do is, we are going to create a few users and also roles, and the roles we are going to assign to the user. Okay, so that we have few of the users in hand that we can use in our security logic at Spring Security. When we try to access the flight resource, we have those users, and we can try to access and see how the security, Spring Security, comes in action when we use those users. Okay, and that user tries to log in basically. So that's all for this video, and I will see you in the next session. Thank you.